The maintenance bay of the starship Sovereign's Pride hummed with the low thrum of recycling systems and atmospheric processors. Marcus Chen knelt beside a damaged power coupling, his weathered hands working methodically with tools that had seen better decades. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the controlled environment, and his jumpsuit bore the stains of countless repairs performed in the bowels of the massive warship. "Still crawling around down here, meat?" The voice belonged to Sub-Commander Vex Tar, a Zalani whose serpentine features twisted into what passed for a sneer among his species. The alien's scaled hide gleamed with an oily sheen under the harsh utility lighting, and his forearms gestured dismissively at the human's work. "Perhaps you should consider finding employment more suited to your limited capabilities." Marcus didn't look up from his work. His fingers continued their practiced dance across the circuitry, bypassing blown fuses and rerouting power through secondary channels. The coupling sparked once, then hummed to life with a satisfying resonance that vibrated through the deck plating. "Systems running at 98% efficiency," Marcus said quietly, wiping his hands on a grease-stained cloth. "Better than factory specifications." Vextar's laugh was a harsh, chittering sound. "Efficiency means nothing when the work comes from an inferior species. The Galactic Council was foolish to allow humans into the fleet. You lack the cognitive sophistication for true engineering." The Zalani's words carried the casual cruelty that Marcus had grown accustomed to over his 15 years of service. It wasn't personal hatred that would have required seeing him as worthy of genuine emotion. Instead, it was the dismissive contempt reserved for useful animals who had learned clever tricks. Marcus stood slowly, his knees protesting, after hours spent crouched over the machinery. At 52, he felt every year of his service in the ache of his joints and the gray threading through his black hair. He had been young when humanity first made contact with the Galactic Federation, bright-eyed and eager to prove that his species deserved a place among the stars. That optimism had died by degrees, worn away by 1,000 small humiliations and casual dismissals. Humans, it had been determined by the Council of Species, possessed certain useful traits: adaptability, persistence, and a peculiar talent for improvised solutions. However, they lacked the intellectual gifts of the Keth Mori, the technological prowess of the Nelvan Collective, or the strategic brilliance of the hegemony's military caste. They were maintenance workers, cargo handlers, and general laborers. Useful, but unremarkable. "I'll submit my report to Engineering Command," Marcus said, gathering his tools. "The power grid for sections 12 through 15 is now operating within normal parameters." Vextar blocked his path, all four arms spread wide. The alien stood nearly 7 feet tall, his elongated skull housing a brain that the Federation's tests had rated as significantly superior to human cognitive capacity. "You will submit your report to me first, meat. I am the duty officer for this section, and I will not have my record tarnished by shoddy human workmanship." Marcus had learned long ago that arguing was pointless. The Federation's hierarchy was rigid, and humans occupied the lowest rungs. He handed over his datapad without comment, watching as Vextar's narrow eyes scanned the technical readouts. The Zalani's expression shifted from dismissive contempt to something approaching surprise. The power coupling Marcus had repaired wasn't just functional, it was operating at efficiency levels that exceeded the ship's original design specifications. More troubling for Vextar was the elegance of the solution. Where standard Federation protocol would have required replacing the entire coupling assembly, the human had somehow coaxed peak performance from components that should have been considered scrap. "How did you achieve this efficiency rating?" Vextar demanded, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "I rerouted the primary feed through the tertiary buffers and used the auxiliary dampening field to eliminate harmonic resonance," Marcus replied. "Standard procedure for cascade failures in Mark 7 power systems." It wasn't standard procedure. Marcus had developed the technique himself after years of working with Federation equipment that was never designed for human hands. He had learned to see patterns in the technology that others missed, to understand the subtle relationships between systems that even their alien designers overlooked. But explaining that would only invite more scrutiny, and scrutiny led to uncomfortable questions. Vextar's silence stretched long enough for Marcus to grow uneasy. The Zalani's 4 eyes studied the human with an intensity that felt almost predatory. "Report to primary engineering at 0800 tomorrow," Vextar finally said. "Chief Engineer Kolthes wants to discuss your methods." Marcus felt his stomach drop. In 15 years of service, he had carefully maintained a low profile. He did his work competently but not spectacularly, fixed what was broken without drawing attention to his innovations, and endured the casual racism of his superiors with stoic silence. Being noticed by the ship's chief engineer was the last thing he wanted. "Is there a problem with my work?" Marcus asked. "That remains to be determined," Vextar replied, his scaled features unreadable. "The chief engineer has been reviewing efficiency reports across all sections. Your name has appeared with unusual frequency." After Vextar departed, Marcus remained alone in the maintenance bay, surrounded by the familiar hum of machinery. He had known this day would come eventually. It was impossible to work at his true capacity while appearing mediocre, and the gap between human potential and Federation expectations was wider than any of the alien species suspected. The truth was that humans weren't the simple-minded laborers the galaxy believed them to be. They were something far more dangerous, a species whose capabilities had been systematically underestimated and whose true nature remained hidden behind a facade of compliance and servility. Marcus Chen was not just a maintenance worker. He was a former Earth Defense Force engineer who had held the rank of commander before humanity's capitulation to the Federation. He possessed 3 advanced degrees in theoretical physics and had contributed to the design of Earth's first faster-than-light drive. His current assignment was not the result of limited capability. It was the result of a careful strategy that had taken decades to implement. Humanity had not joined the Galactic Federation as equals. They had been conquered, their military shattered in a brief but decisive conflict that demonstrated the vast technological superiority of the established galactic powers. The terms of surrender had been generous by galactic standards. Humans would be permitted to maintain their homeworld and serve in the Federation fleet, but they would do so in carefully limited roles. What the aliens hadn't realized was that humans were very good at appearing harmless. The real Marcus Chen had died in the war, along with most of Earth's military leadership. The man who wore his name now was someone else entirely. A ghost who had spent 15 years learning every system, every weakness, and every secret that the Federation's ships contained. He was not alone. Scattered throughout the fleet were hundreds of others like him, former military personnel who had traded their ranks and identities for the chance to serve in roles that seemed beneath notice but provided unprecedented access to the galaxy's most sensitive installations. They called themselves the Reapers, and they had been waiting patiently for their time to come. Marcus made his way through the ship's corridors, noting the locations of security sensors and guard posts with the practiced eye of someone who had been mapping the vessel for years. The Sovereign's Pride was a dreadnought-class battleship, one of the Federation's most powerful warships and the flagship of the 3rd Battle Fleet. Its crew of 12,000 represented 7 different species, each convinced of their own superiority over the humans who maintained their technology. In his small quarters near the engineering section, Marcus activated what appeared to be a standard personal communication terminal. A few keystrokes accessed a hidden partition that contained software of his own design, programs that could monitor Federation communications, track ship movements, and coordinate with similar installations throughout the fleet. A message was waiting for him. coded in a cipher that would appear as routine maintenance logs to any casual observer. The sender was identifying herself as Sarah Kim, though he knew that wasn't her real name either. She was currently serving as a data analyst aboard the command carrier Endless Vigilance, and her message was brief but significant. Package delivery scheduled for the Winter Festival. All recipients have been notified. Please confirm your attendance. Marcus stared at the screen for a long moment. The Winter Festival was a code phrase they had hoped never to use. It meant that Earth was under direct threat and that the Reapers had been activated for their ultimate mission. Whatever was happening in Federation space, it was serious enough to risk exposing their network after 15 years of careful concealment. He composed his reply with the same care he brought to his engineering work. Attendance confirmed. We'll bring appropriate gifts for the celebration. After sending the message, Marcus began the process of preparing for what was to come. From a hidden compartment in his wall locker, he retrieved items that would seem innocuous to any casual inspection: a small toolkit, some spare components, and a data storage device that appeared to be a standard Federation-issue memory core. The toolkit contained instruments of his own design, crafted over years of careful work in the ship's machine shops. To any observer, they would appear to be modified maintenance tools. In reality, they were precision devices capable of accessing and manipulating the most secure systems on the ship. The spare components were similarly deceptive. They appeared to be standard replacement parts for various shipboard systems, but each had been carefully modified to serve dual purposes. When installed in the right locations, they would create hidden access points that would allow him to take control of critical systems throughout the ship. The data storage device was perhaps the most dangerous item in his possession. It contained a complete schematic of Federation military technology, compiled over decades of careful observation and analysis. More importantly, it contained the locations and activation codes for every Reaper agent scattered throughout the galactic fleet. Marcus had hoped he would never need to use any of these items. He had spent 15 years praying that Earth would find some other way to secure its freedom, that the careful game of intelligence gathering and technological infiltration would never escalate to direct action. But the message had been clear, and Marcus Chen had never been one to shirk his duty. The next morning arrived with the ship's artificial dawn cycle, and Marcus made his way to primary engineering with the measured pace of someone reporting for routine duty. The section was already bustling with activity as the day shift took over from their night counterparts. Federation efficiency demanded that the ship's systems operate with clockwork precision, and any deviation from optimal performance was quickly noted and corrected. Chief Engineer Cole Thess waited for him near the primary power distribution center, her massive frame dwarfing the console displays around her. The hegemony female stood nearly 8 feet tall and massed perhaps 400 pounds, most of it dense muscle and heavy bone that had evolved to handle the crushing gravity of her homeworld. Her species was renowned throughout the galaxy for their engineering prowess, and Cole Thess had earned her position through a combination of technical brilliance and ruthless competence. "Maintenance worker Chen," she rumbled, her voice carrying the deep harmonics that marked her species. "Your recent work has attracted attention." Marcus came to attention in the respectful but not servile manner that was expected of human crew members. "Yes, Chief. I was informed that you wanted to discuss my methods." Colthus gestured to a nearby workstation where several data displays showed technical readouts from systems throughout the ship. Marcus recognized his own handiwork in the efficiency curves and performance metrics, repairs and optimizations he had made over the past several months. "These numbers are interesting," Colthus continued. "In every case where you have performed maintenance, system performance has improved beyond baseline specifications. This is unusual." Marcus kept his expression carefully neutral. "I try to be thorough in my work, Chief." "Thorough," Colthus repeated, and there was something almost amused in her tone. Yes, that is one way to describe it. Tell me, Worker Chen, what do you see when you look at this ship's engineering systems? The question caught Marcus off guard. It wasn't what he had expected from a routine disciplinary meeting. I see systems that could operate more efficiently with proper tuning, Chief. Most Federation equipment is designed with large safety margins that leave room for optimization. And you feel qualified to make such optimizations without authorization? Marcus chose his words carefully. I follow all established maintenance protocols, Chief. I don't make unauthorized modifications. It was technically true, even if it omitted the fact that his authorized maintenance often involved techniques that no Federation engineer had ever considered. Human intuition and pattern recognition allowed him to see relationships in the technology that its original designers had missed, but explaining that would require revealing capabilities that humans were supposed to lack. Kolthes studied him with the intense focus that her species brought to any problem of interest. Worker Chen, I am going to ask you a direct question. And I expect a direct answer. What is your actual level of technical training? The moment stretched between them like a taut cable. Marcus could feel the weight of 15 years of careful deception pressing down on him. A wrong word here could expose not just himself but the entire Reaper network. Yet something in Kolthes's manner suggested that she already suspected more than she was saying. I have the standard technical certifications required for my position, Marcus replied. My training comes primarily from practical experience. Practical experience, Kolthes mused. In my species culture, Worker Chen, we have a saying, the sword that cuts deepest is often the one that appears dull. I am beginning to suspect that humans are much sharper than they pretend to be. Before Marcus could respond, an alarm began sounding throughout the engineering section. Red lights bathed the compartment in warning colors, and the ship's intercom crackled to life with the urgent voice of the bridge watch officer. All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill. Unknown vessels have been detected at the edge of the system. All departments report readiness status immediately. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Unknown vessels in Federation space could mean only one thing. Earth's fleet had finally made its move. After 15 years of preparation, the war was beginning again, and he was trapped in the heart of enemy territory with his cover about to be blown. Around him, the engineering section erupted into controlled chaos as Federation personnel rushed to bring the ship's systems to combat readiness. Emergency protocols engaged automatically, sealing blast doors and routing power to weapons and defensive systems. Within minutes, the Sovereign's Pride would be ready to engage in battle against an enemy that none of its crew truly understood. Marcus Chen stood perfectly still in the midst of the activity, his mind racing through possibilities and contingencies. The conversation with Kolthes would have to wait. Everything would have to wait. Because the Reapers had been activated, and 15 years of patience were about to culminate in a revelation that would shake the galaxy to its foundations. The aliens had misjudged humanity once before, and they were about to discover that some mistakes can only be made once. The bridge of the Sovereign's Pride thrummed with barely controlled tension as Captain Mordash studied the tactical displays. The Kethmori commander was a veteran of 3 galactic conflicts, his crystalline carapace bearing the ritual scarring that marked his rise through the Federation's military hierarchy. His multifaceted eyes processed information faster than most organic brains, allowing him to track dozens of variables simultaneously. But what he saw on the screens defied his considerable experience. "Sensor report," he commanded, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that indicated stress among his species. Lieutenant Commander Jen Tar, the ship's Nelvan tactical officer, manipulated her console with the fluid grace of her aquatic species. Her bioluminescent patches flickered in patterns that conveyed both concentration and confusion. 37 vessels, Captain. They've dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge and are holding position. Configuration unknown. They don't match any design in our database. Power signatures? Minimal emissions, sir. They're running silent except for basic life support. But Captain... Gentar paused, her gill slits fluttering with uncertainty. Their formation suggests they're experienced military units. The positioning is too precise to be anything else. Captain Mordash felt the familiar chill that preceded major combat operations. In his 70 years of service, he had learned to trust his instincts, and those instincts were screaming warnings. The unknown fleet hadn't attacked, hadn't even targeted the Federation forces in the system, but everything about their positioning suggested they were waiting for something. "Communications from Admiral Vorthak," announced the ship's hegemony communications officer. "The Third Battle Fleet is to form defensive positions around the primary naval facility. All ships are to maintain combat readiness until the unknown vessels identify themselves." The naval facility in question was Outpost Meridian, one of the Federation's most important strategic installations. Located at the junction of 3 major hyperspace routes, it served as a staging area for military operations across an entire sector. Its massive shipyards could construct or repair vessels up to Dreadnought class, and its arsenals contained enough weapons to outfit a dozen fleets. It was also, though none of the Federation commanders realized it, the primary target of the operation that Marcus Chen and his fellow Reapers had spent 15 years preparing for. In engineering, Marcus worked with methodical precision despite the chaos around him. The battle station's alert had triggered automatic lockdown protocols throughout the ship, but his maintenance access codes still allowed him to move freely through most sections. To any observer, he appeared to be conducting routine system checks in preparation for combat. In reality, he was activating contingencies that had been carefully prepared over years of patient work. The first step was establishing secure communications with other Reaper agents aboard the ship. Marcus had identified 17 other humans in positions throughout the vessel: janitors, cargo handlers, food service workers, and minor technicians whose jobs provided access to critical areas while remaining beneath notice. Each had been carefully recruited and trained for this moment. Using the ship's own maintenance network, Marcus sent coded signals disguised as routine system diagnostics. One by one, his people acknowledged ready status. Sarah Martinez in waste recycling confirmed she had access to the ship's water processing systems. David Park in the galley reported that he could access the food preparation areas and the chemicals used in atmospheric processing. Thomas Rodriguez in cargo handling had positioned himself near the ammunition storage compartments. Each agent had spent years learning their assigned systems, understanding not just how to operate them, but how to weaponize them when the time came. The Federation's own efficiency had made their job easier. Standardized components and procedures meant that techniques developed on one ship could be applied throughout the fleet. "Unknown vessels are responding to our hails," announced the communications officer on the ship's intercom. "They're requesting permission to approach under diplomatic protocols." Marcus felt a grim smile tug at the corners of his mouth. The diplomatic approach was a ruse, of course, but one that would buy them the time they needed. The Federation's own laws required them to honor diplomatic immunity, even for unknown species. It was a courtesy that humans had never received. Chief Engineer Cole Thess appeared at Marcus's workstation, her massive frame moving with surprising silence. "Worker Chen, I need you to conduct a full diagnostic of the weapon system's power grid. We must ensure maximum efficiency if we're forced into combat." The request was routine, exactly the kind of work that a maintenance engineer would be expected to perform during battle preparations. What Coltis couldn't know was that Marcus had been waiting for exactly this opportunity for 3 years. "Yes, Chief," Marcus replied, gathering his tools. "I'll start with the primary phaser arrays and work my way through the secondary systems." As he made his way to the weapons control sections, Marcus felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Everything that happened in the next few hours would determine not just his own fate, but the future of humanity itself. The Federation had ruled the galaxy for 8 centuries, expanding their territory through a combination of technological superiority and diplomatic manipulation. Species that couldn't be conquered were absorbed through trade agreements and political pressure. Those that resisted were crushed. Humanity had resisted and had been crushed. But unlike previous civilizations that had challenged Federation dominance, humans had possessed one critical advantage. They had recognized their defeat and adapted to it. Instead of fighting a feudal guerrilla war or accepting permanent subjugation, they had chosen a third path. They had become invisible. The Weapons Control Center was located 3 decks below the bridge, heavily armored and protected by multiple layers of security. Under normal circumstances, a maintenance worker would never be allowed unescorted access to such a sensitive area. But combat preparations had stretched the ship's security personnel thin, and Marcus's work orders from the chief engineer gave him legitimate reason to be there. The Zalani weapons officer barely glanced up as Marcus entered with his toolkit. Like most of his species, Sub-Commander Vexton was focused on his displays to the exclusion of everything else. The alien's 4 arms moved in a complex pattern across his controls, running final checks on the ship's formidable arsenal. Marcus had studied the Sovereign's Pride's weapons systems for years. The ship mounted 16 heavy phaser arrays capable of reducing a planet's surface to molten rock, plus torpedo launchers that could deliver antimatter warheads with pinpoint accuracy across interstellar distances. Its defensive shields could absorb tremendous punishment, and its armor was constructed from materials that were literally stronger than neutronium. On paper, it was nearly invulnerable. In practice, it had a single critical weakness that Marcus had discovered during his second year aboard the ship. Working with practiced efficiency, Marcus opened the primary power distribution panel and began running diagnostic routines. To any observer, he was simply checking the connections that fed power to the weapon systems. In reality, he was installing a series of microscopic devices that would remain completely undetectable until activated. Each device was a masterpiece of miniaturized engineering, smaller than a grain of rice, but containing circuits that could disrupt the quantum fields that powered the ship's weapons. When triggered, they would create cascade failures that would propagate through the entire weapons grid in a matter of seconds. The ship would lose its ability to fire just at the moment when that capability was most desperately needed. The work required absolute precision, and Marcus had spent hundreds of hours practicing the procedures on simulation equipment. His hands moved with surgical precision, installing each device in locations where it would be invisible to standard diagnostic scans. The Zalani weapons officer remained absorbed in his preparations, completely unaware that his ship's fangs were being systematically removed. "Worker Chen," Vexton said suddenly, causing Marcus to freeze with the device half installed. "How much longer will this diagnostic require?" Marcus forced his breathing to remain steady as he completed the installation. "Almost finished, Sub-Commander. I'm just checking the final connections in the torpedo control systems." "Be quick about it. We may need those weapons very soon." Marcus completed his work and ran a final diagnostic that showed all systems operating within normal parameters. The sabotage devices would remain dormant until activated by a coded transmission, and their presence wouldn't be detected by any standard Federation scanning protocol. As he prepared to leave the weapons center, Marcus caught sight of the main tactical display. The unknown fleet had moved closer to Outpost Meridian, and their formation had shifted into what any experienced military commander would recognize as an attack pattern. Whatever diplomatic charade they were maintaining wouldn't last much longer. "Unknown vessels have been identified," the ship's intercom announced. "They appear to be of human origin, though their technology level exceeds our previous assessments by a considerable margin. Fleet Command has authorized defensive measures." Marcus felt his heart skip. Human ships, with technology that exceeded Federation assessments. That could only mean one thing: Earth's hidden research programs had finally borne fruit. While the visible human population had spent 15 years appearing to accept their place as second-class citizens, their brightest minds had been working in secret to develop weapons and defenses that could challenge galactic dominance. The plan had always been to hide their true capabilities until they could field a fleet that could match Federation technology. Marcus and the other Reapers had provided crucial intelligence about enemy systems and capabilities, but the real work had been done in concealed facilities throughout the solar system. Now it seemed that work was complete. Marcus made his way through the ship's corridors as alarms continued to sound and crew members rushed to their posts. The artificial gravity generators hummed with increased power as the vessel's inertial dampeners prepared to handle combat maneuvers. Throughout the ship, thousands of Federation personnel prepared for a battle they were certain they would win. They had never lost a major engagement. Their technology was proven across centuries of conflict. Their tactics had been refined through conquest of dozens of species. They had every reason for confidence. They had no idea that they were already defeated. In his quarters, Marcus activated his hidden communication system and sent a brief coded transmission. Reaper 1 to all units. Harvest time. Throughout the ship, 17 other humans received the signal and began their final preparations. In the torpedo storage areas, Thomas Rodriguez began the delicate process of accessing the antimatter containment systems. A small malfunction at the right moment would turn the ship's own weapons into an internal bomb. In the atmospheric processing center, David Park prepared to introduce trace compounds that would impair the cognitive functions of non-human species. In waste processing, Sarah Martinez positioned herself to contaminate the ship's water supply with agents that would cause severe digestive distress in alien physiology. Each action was small, easily concealed, and perfectly timed. Individually, none would cripple the ship. Together, they would turn the Sovereign's pride from a feared instrument of war into a floating tomb. On the bridge, Captain Mordash watched as the human fleet finally dropped their diplomatic pretense and accelerated toward Outpost Meridian. Their ships moved with a precision that spoke of experienced crews and advanced technology, but he had faced desperate enemies before. No single species had ever successfully challenged Federation supremacy. "All ships, prepare to engage," Admiral Vorthak's voice commanded across the fleet communication channel. "Show these humans the price of defying galactic authority." The third battle fleet consisted of 42 capital ships, including 3 Dreadnought-class battleships and supporting vessels that carried enough firepower to sterilize entire solar systems. Against them, the human fleet numbered only 37 ships of unknown capability. By every conventional measure, the outcome should have been inevitable, but as the first shots were fired and the two fleets closed to engagement range, strange things began happening aboard the Federation vessels. Weapon systems that had tested perfectly minutes earlier suddenly developed power fluctuations. Shields that should have absorbed enemy fire flickered and failed at critical moments. Navigation systems reported false readings that sent ships off course just as they lined up for optimal firing solutions. Throughout the fleet, human maintenance workers and service personnel had spent years learning every system, every vulnerability, and every way to turn the Federation's own technology against itself. The Reapers had waited 15 years for this moment, and they had used that time well. Marcus Chen stood in the engineering section of the Sovereign's Pride, watching as chaos erupted around him. Federation officers ran from station to station trying to understand why their ship was falling apart just when they needed it most. Emergency lighting bathed everything in hellish red as primary power systems failed throughout the vessel. "Chief Engineer to all repair teams," Colthus's voice boomed over the intercom. "We have cascading failures in multiple systems. All maintenance personnel report to your assigned stations immediately." Marcus grabbed his toolkit and prepared to respond to the emergency, just as he had trained himself to do. But this time, instead of fixing the problems, he would be making them worse. The Federation had spent decades teaching humans to maintain their technology. They had never considered what would happen when those same humans decided to break it instead. The command center of Earth Defense Station Alpha buzzed with controlled intensity as Admiral Sarah Chen watched the tactical displays show the engagement unfolding near Outpost Meridian. Hidden in the asteroid belt beyond Pluto, the massive station had been humanity's secret heart for 15 years, a fortress built from hollowed-out asteroids and powered by fusion reactors that had never appeared in any Federation database. Admiral Chen bore no relation to Marcus Chen beyond the shared surname that had once been common among Earth's military personnel. Like thousands of others, she had officially died during the Federation conquest, her records altered to show that she had perished in the final battle over Mars. In reality, she had been evacuating to the hidden stations that would become humanity's last hope. "Status report from our assets in the Federation fleet," she commanded, her weathered face illuminated by the soft glow of holographic displays. Commander Harrison, her intelligence chief, manipulated his console with quick, efficient movements. "Reaper teams are reporting successful activation across 47 Federation vessels. Weapon systems are experiencing cascade failures, life support is compromised on 18 ships, and their tactical coordination is breaking down. And our fleet? Performing beyond expectations, Admiral. The new technology is holding up well against Federation firepower. Captain Martinez reports that the quantum armor is absorbing their energy weapons with minimal power drain, and our return fire is penetrating their shields more effectively than projected." Admiral Chen allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The fleet that was currently engaging the Federation's third battle group represented 20 years of desperate innovation and hidden development. While Marcus and the other Reapers had been gathering intelligence from within enemy ships, Earth's brightest minds had been revolutionizing human technology in ways the galaxy had never seen. The key breakthrough had come 12 years ago when Dr. Elizabeth Wang had discovered how to manipulate quantum foam at the subatomic level. Her research, conducted in a laboratory carved from a Kuiper Belt asteroid, had led to developments in energy generation, armor technology, and faster-than-light travel that leapfrogged centuries of conventional advancement. The Federation had made a critical error in their assessment of human potential. They had measured humanity against their own technological development, assuming that any species capable of achieving faster-than-light travel would follow the same research paths. What they hadn't anticipated was that humans would approach the fundamental problems of physics from entirely different directions. Where Federation technology relied on massive energy expenditures and brute force solutions, human innovation had focused on efficiency and elegance. Their quantum armor didn't try to absorb incoming energy. It redirected it through dimensional folding that sent the attack energy into empty space. Their weapons didn't overpower enemy shields. They found frequency resonances that caused the shields to collapse from within. "Admiral, we're receiving transmissions from Federation Command," reported Lieutenant Patel from the communication station. "They're demanding that the attacking fleet identify itself and state its intentions." "Put me through to Captain Martinez," Admiral Chen commanded. "It's time to announce ourselves properly." The main display shifted to show the bridge of the lead human vessel, the UES Retribution. Captain Elena Martinez looked exactly like what she was, a former Earth Defense Force officer who had spent the last 15 years preparing for this moment. Her uniform bore the insignia of an Earth that officially no longer existed, and her eyes carried the hardness that came from years of simulated death and hidden struggle. "Admiral, the Federation fleet is attempting to regroup," Martinez reported. "Their command vessel is trying to establish a new tactical network to bypass the system failures we've caused. Then it's time to show them what humanity has become." Admiral Chen replied. "Begin Phase 2 of the operation. And Captain, open a channel to the Federation flagship. It's time they learned who they've been underestimating." Aboard the Sovereign's Pride, chaos had descended like a plague. The ship's primary weapon systems had failed completely, leaving the massive dreadnought toothless at the worst possible moment. Life support was functioning on backup power only, and several decks had been sealed off due to atmospheric contamination that the ship's medical computers couldn't identify. Captain Mordash stood at the center of the bridge, his crystalline carapace darkened with stress patterns as he tried to comprehend what was happening to his vessel. In 3 decades of command, he had never experienced such a complete system failure. It was as if the ship itself had decided to rebel against its crew. "Engineering reports massive power fluctuations in all primary systems," reported his executive officer. "Chief Engineer Koltes believes we may have been subjected to some form of advanced cyber warfare." "Impossible," Mordash replied, though his voice carried less certainty than his words. "Our computer systems are isolated from external networks. No enemy technology could penetrate our security protocols." The main display suddenly cleared, replacing the tactical readouts with an image that struck the Federation crew like a physical blow. A human face appeared on the screen, female, middle-aged, wearing a military uniform that none of them recognized. Behind her, they could see what was clearly the command center of a warship, but the technology visible in the background was unlike anything in their databases. "Federation vessels, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force," the human said, her voice carrying across the communication channels with crystal clarity. "You are currently engaged with the Terran Liberation Fleet, operating under the authority of the Sovereign Republic of Earth." Captain Mordash felt his breathing apparatus stutter. The human was claiming to represent Earth, but that was impossible. Earth was a conquered world, its military destroyed, its population serving the Federation as manual laborers and maintenance workers. The idea that they could have built a fleet capable of challenging galactic authority was beyond comprehension. "This is Captain Mordash of the Federation vessel, Sovereign's Pride," he responded, struggling to maintain his composure. "You are in violation of the Galactic Peace Accords. Surrender immediately, and your crews will be treated according to the established protocols for prisoner handling." Admiral Chen's smile was cold as stellar radiation. "Captain Mordash, the Galactic Peace Accords were imposed on humanity without our consent. After our defeat in a war we never wanted to fight. We have spent 15 years honoring those accords while you and your allies treated our people as second-class citizens. Today, those accords are terminated." Around the bridge, Federation crew members exchanged shocked glances. The humans' words carried implications that none of them wanted to accept. If Earth had somehow managed to rebuild its military capability while appearing to comply with Federation oversight, then their intelligence networks had failed catastrophically. "Captain," the tactical officer reported, her voice tight with disbelief, "sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from the human fleet. Their power output exceeds anything in our databases. Some of their ships are generating more energy than our dreadnoughts." On the display, Admiral Chen continued her address. "For 15 years, Federation commanders like yourself have dismissed humanity as intellectually inferior. You've assigned us to menial roles and convinced yourselves that we lack the capability for advanced technological development. You've made the same mistake that countless civilizations have made throughout history. You've confused compliance with inability." In the engineering section several decks below, Marcus Chen listened to the Admiral's speech while working frantically at a damaged control console. Around him, Federation engineers struggled to understand why their ship was falling apart, completely unaware that the human maintenance worker in their midst was systematically sabotaging every repair attempt. Marcus had spent years studying the psychological profiles of Federation species, learning their strengths and weaknesses with the same dedication he brought to understanding their technology. The Keth Mori were brilliant tacticians, but relied heavily on established protocols. Disrupt their command structure, and their responses became predictable. The Nelvan were excellent engineers, but thought in linear patterns that made them vulnerable to unconventional attacks. The Hegemony were physically powerful but overconfident in their technological superiority. Each species had been conquered and absorbed into the Federation because their individual capabilities complemented each other perfectly. Together they formed an alliance that had dominated the galaxy for 8 centuries. But their success had bred a complacency that was now proving fatal. "Worker Chen," Chief Engineer Colthes called out, her massive frame moving toward his position. "I need you to bypass the primary power distribution network. Something is causing cascade failures throughout the ship." Marcus looked up from his work, tools in hand, playing the role he had perfected over 15 years. "I'm trying, Chief, but the failures seem to be propagating faster than I can isolate them. It's like the ship's own systems are working against us." It was exactly like that because that was precisely what was happening. Every component Marcus had modified over the years was now activating in sequence, creating failures that appeared random but were actually carefully orchestrated to cripple the ship at the worst possible moment. "Chief Engineer," came an urgent call from the communications station. "Admiral Vorthak is requesting immediate status reports from all vessels. Fleet Command needs to know our combat capabilities." Coltes's response was a low growl of frustration. "Tell the Admiral that we are experiencing severe technical difficulties. Our weapon systems are offline, shields are operating at 30% efficiency, and we have multiple hull breaches on the lower decks." Marcus continued his apparent repair work while listening to reports from throughout the ship. It was the same story everywhere. Systems failing at critical moments, backups not engaging properly, and diagnostic programs reporting false data that sent repair teams to the wrong locations. The Sovereign's pride was being systematically disabled from within by the very people the Federation had trained to maintain it. On the bridge, Captain Mordash watched in growing horror as his fleet's tactical position deteriorated. The human ships moved with a precision that spoke of advanced tactical computers and experienced crews, but their technology was proving far more effective than Federation intelligence had indicated. Energy beams that should have been absorbed by Federation shields were penetrating with devastating effect. Return fire from the Federation fleet was being deflected by defensive systems that seemed to violate known laws of physics. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "the human fleet has surrounded Outpost Meridian. They're not attempting to destroy the facility. They appear to be boarding it." The implications of that revelation struck Mordash like a physical blow. Outpost Meridian contained classified research data on every Federation military technology, complete tactical databases, and communication codes for the entire Third Sector fleet. If the humans captured that information intact, they would possess detailed intelligence on Federation capabilities across a quarter of the galaxy. But even as he grappled with that disaster, a worse realization was beginning to dawn. The coordinated nature of the system failures throughout the Federation fleet suggested something that his military training had taught him to watch for but never expect: sabotage from within. "All human personnel are to be confined to quarters immediately," he commanded. "Security teams are to escort them under armed guard. No human is to have access to any shipboard systems until this engagement is concluded." But it was already too late. Throughout the ship, Marcus and his fellow Reapers had completed their primary objectives. The Federation vessel was effectively neutralized, its weapons offline, its systems failing, and its crew struggling to understand what had happened to their supposedly invincible ship. Marcus set down his tools and stepped away from the console he had been pretending to repair. Around him, Federation engineers continued their frantic efforts to restore functionality to systems that he had just finished sabotaging. When the security teams arrived to arrest him, he would go quietly. His part in the operation was complete. "Chief Engineer," he said calmly, "I'm afraid there's something you need to know about the cascade failures." Kolthes turned toward him, her massive frame radiating the controlled aggression of her species. "What are you talking about, Worker Chen?" Marcus straightened to his full height, abandoning the subservient posture that had been his disguise for 15 years. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had once commanded starships of his own. "They're not random failures, Chief. Every system that's malfunctioning was modified over the past several years to fail at this exact moment. The cascade pattern was designed to cripple this ship's combat capability while making the damage appear accidental." The silence that greeted this announcement was profound. Around the engineering section, Federation personnel stopped their work and stared at the human who had just confessed to the systematic sabotage of their vessel. Kolthes was the first to break the silence, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been respect. "You did this. All of it." "Not just me," Marcus replied. "There are others. Humans scattered throughout this ship and every other vessel in the Federation fleet. We've been waiting 15 years for this moment, learning your systems, understanding your weaknesses, and preparing for the day when Earth would reclaim its freedom." The chief engineer's reaction was not what Marcus had expected. Instead of rage or disbelief, Kolthes began to laugh, a deep, rumbling sound that reverberated through the engineering section. "Incredible," she said finally. "For 15 years, the Federation has believed that humans were intellectually inferior. We assigned you to maintenance roles because we thought you lacked the cognitive capability for advanced work. But you were studying us, learning from us, preparing to destroy us from within. The Federation made the mistake of judging us by our apparent compliance," Marcus replied. "You confused our willingness to accept defeat with an inability to plan for revenge. Humans are very good at playing the long game when we need to." On the main display, the tactical situation continued to deteriorate for the Federation fleet. Human ships were systematically destroying or disabling their opponents, while the defensive batteries of Outpost Meridian had fallen silent as human boarding parties secured the facility. What had begun as a routine response to unauthorized vessels had become a catastrophic defeat that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Chief Engineer Kolthes studied Marcus with the intense focus that her species brought to problems of exceptional interest. "Worker Chen, though I suspect that is not your real name, you have accomplished something remarkable. You have demonstrated that the Federation's greatest strength is also its greatest weakness, which is our certainty in our own superiority," Kolthes replied. "We have ruled the galaxy so long that we forgot to consider the possibility that our subjects might be more dangerous than they appeared. Your species has just taught us a lesson that we should have learned centuries ago." Marcus nodded slowly. "The lesson that underestimating your enemies is the fastest path to defeat." Around them, alarms continued to sound as the Sovereign's Pride limped through space with its systems failing one by one. But in the engineering section, an odd moment of mutual understanding passed between the hegemony officer and the human saboteur who had just destroyed her ship. It was a moment that would be remembered long after the battle was over, when the galaxy began to understand that humanity had returned to claim its place among the stars, not as servants, but as conquerors. 3 months after the Battle of Outpost Meridian, the galaxy had become a very different place. The news of humanity's victory had spread through the Federation's communication networks like wildfire, carrying with it implications that no species wanted to acknowledge but none could ignore. The humans, those supposedly inferior beings who had served as janitors and maintenance workers, had just handed the galaxy's dominant military force its first major defeat in over 2 centuries. The Galactic Council chamber on the capital world of Nexus Prime had never been intended to accommodate desperation, but that emotion hung thick in the recycled atmosphere as representatives from dozens of species gathered for an emergency session. The great amphitheater, with its soaring arches and crystalline viewing screens, had been designed to project power and unity. Now it felt more like a tomb. High Chancellor Zeth Kori, the ancient wisdom keeper whose species had founded the Federation 800 years ago, stood at the central podium with a presence that commanded attention across the vast chamber. His elongated frame and luminous skin marked him as one of the eternal caste, beings whose lifespans measured in millennia, and whose memories contained the complete history of galactic civilization. The situation reports are consistent across all affected sectors, Zeth Kori announced, his voice carrying the harmonic resonances that made his words audible to every species in the chamber. Human uprising actions have been recorded on over 3,000 Federation vessels. Sabotage operations have disabled 47% of our active fleet. Outpost Meridian, Starbase Aurora, and the Kepler Research Facility have all fallen to human forces. A ripple of distress signals passed through the assembled representatives. The Zalani delegation hissed in their complex harmonic language, while the Keth Mori crystalline forms darkened with stress patterns. Even the normally stoic hegemony representatives showed signs of agitation, their massive frames shifting uncomfortably in seats designed to accommodate multiple species. "How many of our vessels were compromised?" asked Councillor Morthak of the Nelvin Collective, her aquatic form suspended in a specialized environment suit. "Our initial estimates suggested minimal human presence in critical positions." "Our initial estimates were catastrophically incorrect," Zeth Kori replied with the bluntness that came from witnessing the rise and fall of civilizations. "Intelligence analysis indicates that humans have been operating a coordinated infiltration network for at least 15 years. They placed operatives in maintenance, food service, waste processing, and other support roles that gave them access to critical ship systems while remaining beneath notice." Admiral Vorth Ak, the hegemony fleet commander who had led the failed defense of Outpost Meridian, rose from his position in the military section. His scarred carapace and missing left arm testified to his recent encounters with human weaponry. "Honored Chancellor, the scope of this deception exceeds anything in our historical records. The humans didn't just infiltrate our ships, they studied our technology, learned our tactics, and developed countermeasures that specifically target our operational weaknesses." "Explain," Zeth Kori commanded. "Their weapon systems use quantum resonance frequencies that cause our shield generators to collapse. Their armor employs dimensional folding that redirects our energy weapons into empty space. Most disturbing of all, their tactical computers seem to anticipate our battle formations and deploy countermeasures before we complete our maneuvers." The implications of this revelation sent another wave of distress through the chamber. If humans had somehow developed technology that could neutralize Federation advantages, then the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted fundamentally. Worse, it suggested that human intelligence capabilities were far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. "We must also address the broader implications," added Councillor Gentar of the Exploration Caste. "Human populations exist throughout Federation territory. If they are capable of coordinated action on this scale, then every world, every facility, and every vessel may be compromised." This was the nightmare scenario that had kept military strategists awake for weeks since the battle. The Federation controlled over 10,000 star systems, with human populations serving in support roles throughout their territory. If those populations could be activated as sleeper agents, then the Federation faced the prospect of simultaneous uprisings across their entire domain. "What response options do we have?" asked Chancellor Mordash, the Keth Mori representative whose crystalline features reflected the chamber's lighting in fractal patterns. Admiral Vorthak's response was grim. "Limited. Our intelligence services estimate that human forces now control approximately 30% of the Outer Rim sectors. They've established what appears to be a provisional government based in the Sol system, and they're actively recruiting allies among species that have grievances against Federation rule. Allies? Zeth Corey's luminous skin flickered with patterns that indicated surprise. Which species have aligned themselves with the human rebellion? The Vilesh Confederacy has declared independence and requested human military assistance. The Silicon Lords have withdrawn from 3 Federation worlds and established autonomous zones. Most concerning, intelligence reports suggest that the Hive Collective is considering formal diplomatic recognition of human independence. The news struck the chamber like a physical blow. The species mentioned were not insignificant colonial populations. They were major civilizations with substantial military capabilities. If they were allying with humanity, then the conflict was evolving from a rebellion into a galactic civil war. In the Sol system, aboard the command station that had once been hidden in the asteroid belt, Admiral Sarah Chen reviewed the latest intelligence reports with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. The Reaper operation had exceeded all expectations, crippling Federation military capability across multiple sectors, while revealing the true extent of human infiltration throughout galactic civilization. But success brought its own problems. The Federation would not accept defeat gracefully, and they possessed resources that could still overwhelm human forces if properly coordinated. Moreover, the political situation was becoming increasingly complex as other species sought to take advantage of Federation weakness. "Admiral, we're receiving a formal communication from the Galactic Council," reported Commander Harrison from the communications station. "They're requesting negotiations under the protocols for interspecies conflict resolution." Admiral Chen studied the tactical displays that showed human forces consolidating control over captured facilities while Federation fleets regrouped in core sectors. The initial phase of the liberation campaign had been remarkably successful, but the easy victories were over. From this point forward, every gain would have to be fought for against increasingly desperate enemies. "Put the communication through to the main conference room," she commanded. "And have Captain Martinez and General Rodriguez join me. If the Federation wants to negotiate, they're going to have to accept that they're dealing with equals." The conference room of Defense Station Alpha had been designed as a backup command center, with holographic displays that could project detailed information about military operations across hundreds of star systems. When Admiral Chen entered, the displays showed the current strategic situation in stark detail. Human forces controlled roughly 1/3 of Federation territory, with active fighting continuing in border regions and several core worlds experiencing civil unrest. The communication from the Galactic Council appeared as a 3-dimensional projection in the center of the room. High Chancellor Zeth Corey's luminous form materialized with perfect clarity, his ancient features carrying an expression that mixed respect with wariness. "Admiral Chen," Zeth Corey began, his voice carrying harmonic undertones that indicated formal diplomatic protocol. "I am authorized to negotiate on behalf of the Galactic Council for a resolution to the current conflict. The Federation is prepared to offer significant concessions in exchange for an end to hostilities." Admiral Chen exchanged glances with her senior staff before responding. "High Chancellor, I appreciate your willingness to negotiate, but I think there may be some confusion about the nature of this conflict. We are not seeking concessions from the Federation. We are demanding the complete independence of humanity and all territories currently under human control." The ancient being's skin patterns shifted to indicate deep consideration. "Admiral, you must understand that the demands you're making would require fundamental changes to the galactic order. The Federation has maintained peace and stability for 8 centuries. What you're proposing could lead to chaos across known space." "The Federation has maintained its own version of order," Admiral Chen replied coolly. That order was built on the conquest and subjugation of species that posed no threat to galactic stability. Humanity never asked to be part of your empire, Chancellor. We were forced into it after a war that we tried to avoid. But surely some form of accommodation can be reached, Zethkori pressed. The Federation could offer autonomous status for human worlds, representation in the Galactic Council, and significant improvements in the treatment of human populations throughout our territory. Admiral Chen's smile was as cold as the space between stars. Chancellor, you're still thinking in terms of what the Federation is willing to grant to humanity. But the situation has changed. We are no longer asking for your permission to be free. We are informing you that we have taken our freedom, and we intend to keep it. The implications of this statement hung in the silence that followed. The Federation had never faced an opponent that could match their technological capabilities while also possessing detailed knowledge of their internal systems and procedures. Humanity represented an existential threat to galactic stability in ways that traditional military conquest could never achieve. Admiral, Zethkori said finally, if negotiations fail, the consequences could be devastating for both our civilizations. The Federation possesses resources that dwarf human capabilities. A prolonged conflict would result in massive casualties and economic devastation across multiple sectors. That's certainly possible, Admiral Chen acknowledged. But you need to consider whether the Federation can afford a prolonged conflict with an enemy that has already demonstrated the ability to turn your own technology against you. Every ship in your fleet, every facility in your territory, and every system in your government contains human personnel who now know exactly how to cripple your operations. This was the central strategic reality that the Federation had been struggling to accept. Their own efficiency and standardization had made them vulnerable to an enemy that understood their systems better than they did themselves. Humans had spent 15 years learning every weakness, every blind spot, and every critical failure point in Federation operations. Moreover, Admiral Chen continued, you need to consider the political implications of this conflict. Other species are watching to see how the Federation responds to a successful challenge to their authority. If you can be defeated by humans, then perhaps the Galactic Council isn't as invincible as it has claimed to be. The truth of this observation was already becoming apparent across Federation territory. The Vailesh Confederacy's Declaration of Independence had been followed by similar movements on a dozen other worlds. The Silicon Lords were openly defying Federation edicts in 3 sectors. Even species that had been loyal Federation members for centuries were beginning to question whether their allegiance was worth maintaining. What are your terms? Zethkori asked, his luminous patterns indicating resignation. Complete independence for all human-controlled territory. Recognition of the Terran Republic as a sovereign entity with full diplomatic status. Immediate release of all human prisoners and compensation for damages inflicted during the conquest period. And most importantly, a formal guarantee that the Federation will not attempt to retaliate against human populations in areas that remain under your control. The terms were harsh, but not unreasonable by the standards of interstellar politics. The Federation had imposed similar conditions on dozens of species over the centuries. The difference was that now they were the ones being forced to accept defeat. I will need to present these terms to the full council, Zethkori replied. The decision will require unanimous consent from all member species. You have 72 hours, Admiral Chen said. After that, we resume active military operations. And Chancellor, I suggest you consider the terms carefully. This is the most generous offer you're going to receive. After the communication ended, Admiral Chen turned to her staff with an expression that mixed triumph with concern. They had achieved something that most of them had thought impossible. They had forced the galaxy's dominant power to the negotiating table as equals. But the real test would come in implementing whatever agreement emerged from those negotiations. "Do you think they'll accept the terms?" asked Captain Martinez. "They'll accept them," Admiral Chen replied. "They have to. The alternative is a war that they can't win and that could destroy everything they've built over 8 centuries. The Federation may be many things, but they're not stupid." In the weeks that followed, the galaxy watched and waited as the Galactic Council debated humanity's terms. The decision was not just about accepting human independence. It was about acknowledging that the Federation's dominance could be challenged and defeated. For species that had spent centuries believing in the inevitability of galactic order, this was a profound philosophical shift. When the Council's answer finally came, it was delivered not by High Chancellor Zeth Kori, but by a joint delegation representing all major Federation species. The ceremony was broadcast across known space, ensuring that every civilization could witness the moment when the balance of power in the galaxy shifted forever. The terms were accepted in full, with additional provisions for economic cooperation and mutual defense agreements. Humanity had not just won its independence, it had established itself as a major galactic power with the respect and recognition that came from proving their capabilities in the crucible of war. But perhaps the most significant moment came at the very end of the ceremony, when Marcus Chen, no longer a maintenance worker, but now wearing the uniform of a Terran Republic naval officer, stood before representatives of the species that had once dismissed him as intellectually inferior. "For 15 years, he said, his voice carrying across the chamber and through communication networks to billions of beings throughout the galaxy. "You saw us as we wanted you to see us. You believed we were harmless because we appeared harmless. You thought we were weak because we accepted defeat. But you never understood the most important thing about humanity." He paused, looking directly at each delegation in turn. "We are very good at learning from our mistakes, and we never make the same mistake twice." The galaxy had learned to fear humanity not because of their weapons or their technology, but because of something far more dangerous: their patience, their adaptability, and their unwillingness to accept permanent defeat. The Reaper had been unleashed, and the cosmos would never underestimate the human spirit again. In the end, it hadn't been strength that won humanity its freedom. It had been the quiet determination of ordinary people who refused to remain ordinary, who transformed themselves into something their enemies could never have imagined, and who proved that sometimes the greatest victories come not from fighting harder, but from fighting smarter. The Federation would remember this lesson for generations to come, and in the depths of space, other civilizations that had felt the weight of galactic oppression began to whisper among themselves about the humans who had shown them that even the mightiest empire could be brought low by those it had dismissed and forgotten. The age of unchallenged Federation dominance was over. The age of humanity had begun.